Gareth Hughes.
Kia ora, Mr Speaker. Ngā mihi nui kia koutou kia ora. Just following on from the member who spoke last, there's a debate in the media at the moment around how we hit post-politics in terms of Trump and everything else. We heard a new phrase there, which was post-history. According to that member, we should put aside the 30 years of history and the debates, the big challenges we've faced, the opportunities we've arose from history. Let's put it all aside and let's, quote, embrace the lens of opportunity. Mr Speaker, this sounds like something out of In the Thick of It, British TV show. It sounds like something that's come out of the brainstorming message room that's been intensively polled by David Farrar. The lens of opportunity is how we're going to talk about it in the future, Mr Speaker. Now, we have to take history into account because it's important, but also it's something the Minister, Hekia Parata, referenced in her speech and all the media around this bill. She's describing this as the biggest update to education in nearly 30 years. Now, Mr Speaker, you could also call it one of the biggest risks and experiments to our children in education for 30 years. You wouldn't know it, though, from the Minister's speech as she read it in her bland monotone, no doubt written by advisors. She didn't have any passion in her presentation. If this is the biggest change in 30 years, I want to see some passion from the Minister. I want to see a sense there's a vision. Because what we heard from that last member, Mr Mueller, is that change is coming globally, and it was an argument for change's sake. How about change which is based on the best practice international literature, change that looks at the trends globally and around the world and brings in the best, discards the worst? And this is the fear with this bill, that we're bringing in the worst, discarding some of the best of our current system. Mr Speaker, as a dad to 2 kids currently going through the state education system, I want to start this contribution by saying what a fantastic job our teachers, our principals, our boards, our schools do. We have a tremendous education system. Collectively, we should be incredibly proud. Just last Friday night, I got an email from my child's teacher in the evening, just with a short update about what had happened. I can't say how proud I was of our education system, how impressed, how good I felt as a parent to have that level of teacher interaction, updating me what I care the most, which is my kids and their future. I thought it was a fantastic example of our education system. So we've got a great start, but let's make sure we're delivering for all New Zealand students and we're building an even better education system. In this contribution, I want to touch on 3 areas of this legislation, which is the communities of online learning, the so-called COOLs, secondly, te reo and Treaty of Waitangi, and thirdly, the careers advice. So the Green Party is opposing this bill because of the huge risk to our children from these so-called COOLs, which I don't think are particularly cool at all. Now, Mr Speaker, there are some good parts of this, some neutral parts. It is a big change to the Education Act, but it's these COOLs, these communities of online learning, which are quite worrying as a parent and as a member of this Parliament. When you look at what the headlines and what the experts in the sector are saying, you see words such as gobsmacked, incredulous, principles hot under the collar, out of line principles, education reforms half-cooked and not so cool, and the risk of harming learning. This is what our educational experts are telling us. We saw the president of the Te Tai Tukaro Principals Association say, and I quote, "I would abhor the day when a computer and program could replace the teacher. The importance of socialisation hasn't been considered. The really rich, holistic parts of education cannot be learned from a computer, but from interacting with people." And the risk is that we're basically, through this legislation, opening up online charter schools. It's that socialisation which is so important to children's development and so important to the educational experience and those educational outcomes. Now, Minister Parata says the guidelines and eligibility criteria around these schools are going to be rigorous. I've got no confidence when we saw those exact same words applied to the likes of Serco, applied to the likes of NovaPay. I have no confidence we're going to see it. This is the government that's delivered charter schools and private profit education system, and now they're trying to do the same thing via the online environment to more of our kids. So when you look around the world, this approach has failed in the US. It's been tried in the UK to a large scale, and there's a huge risk that simply what we're doing is opening up our education system to these private for-profit companies, and I think you've got to ask the question why. Now, I think Angela Roberts put it quite well when she said, one is that online learning, these are the assumptions behind it. One is that online learning can substitute for face-to-face, and the other is a more competitive market in education is going to lead to better results. Both of these fly in the face of evidence. So let's not have change for change's sake because we know change is coming. Let's have change based on the evidence. And pound for pound, page for page of the international reports, you'll see the risks of going down this approach. Now, the Minister said that calls around embracing online digital fluency. This is something the Green Party takes seriously, something we've advanced in Parliament for many years. We've got a great opportunity, not only to build a more digitally fluent country and society, but also to have a better educational experience for our kids. Now, the problem is, just teaching them online isn't digital fluency. It's not teaching them. That's focusing on the means of delivery, the mechanism, the technology. That is not digital fluency. I would point out, and I know this from my own experience, in excellent programs such as Reading X, Mathletics, which my kids really enjoy, where the appropriate technology is used as a tool to enhance further existing learning and stuff they've done in class. Now, when you just put a kid on an iPad or in front of a screen, that is not teaching digital fluency. Our schools are doing it at the moment. There's not barriers to it at the moment. This is simply a way to open up literally classrooms to private providers to be providing online education. Now, if we did want to have a debate about digital fluency, which is something I'm always up for and think this Parliament needs to spend more time on and take more seriously, let's also look at the way the government has recently decided, after 7 years of consultation, multiple meetings, rounds and rounds of consultation, to just make digital technology on par with sewing and woodwork and metalwork, just making it another vocational side thing. This is something which the tech industry, which is crying out for workers, has seen the largest growth as a percentage of GDP of any OECD country since between 2002 and 2013. They want to see it as a standalone subject. If we were really going to be focusing on digital fluency, that's what we would be doing, not just putting kids in front of a screen and letting overseas for-profit providers teach regular classrooms. So, Mr. Speaker, we've got some very big concerns. We note the concern that whilst there was considerable consultation with these changes, I believe there are some 1,800 submissions, 120 meetings, this, the most controversial, the most far-reaching provision in this bill, was not one of those topics which was consulted on. That's a worry, but I'm sure those 1,800 plus people will be no doubt making a submission to the Select Committee, and we welcome that. We look forward to getting into the detail. I've run out of time to talk about the other issues, Mr. Speaker, but it's good to see the Treaty of Waitangi in this legislation. We want to work out through the Select Committee exactly what that means, what are the actual outcomes going to be. And when it comes to te reo, our vision is that every New Zealander has the opportunity to learn what is a taonga, something which is unique and only exists in Aotearoa, New Zealand. But unfortunately, the way this bill has done it, it's basically up for parents to choose if they want te reo. And the fact is, when you look at the status quo, it hasn't really worked out, and we see so few speakers. When it comes to careers advice, I think there is consensus in this House. We're not doing it as well as we should be. It needs to be modernised. A key thing we need to be doing is professionalising it, taking it much more seriously. I want to make sure that every kid in New Zealand gets the best, high-quality, most in-touch advice from someone who's taking it seriously, someone who's a professional, someone who's up-to-date with the best practice, so they're getting the best advice. A concern with putting it through the TEC is we're simply going to get more of a focus on some of those STEM subjects. The arts are incredibly important. General educational background, critical thinking is so important. And in fact, that's what people tell me in the tech sector as well. It's one thing being able to code, it's another thing being able to code and explain what you're doing and to a customer or someone else. So look, there's a mixed bag in this bill. The reason we're voting against it primarily is because of these not cool calls. We can't be gambling with our kids. We are using digital technology. We could be doing it better, but let's have that conversation in the Select Committee. Thank you very much. Kia ora.
Kia ora.